Okay guys, back with the Outer Circle, and to continue on from yesterday, yesterday by the time you watch this video. So, having recorded and recently uploaded the video talking about the Horus Heresy and the book series, the novel series, and listening back to it again, there's more things I want to talk about there. So, I'm going to use that opportunity here and call this What Broke the Fans Part 2. Which is sort of a unique situation we find ourselves in. So, first up, I did notice there was some contention in the comments that are up at the moment. I'm sure there'll be more, given a few more hours. Regarding the, Maka doesn't like character build up, or he doesn't like a long, slow story, or whatever. Guys, look at all the videos I've done on Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, the Silmarillion. I like a slow burn story. The problem here is that we get too sidetracked away from the main story. And this is the problem. You should tell a short, concise tale of what it is to be the Horus Heresy, okay? All that characterization, what comes later on, is fine. Make it its own novel series like the Primarch series is here. They probably could have led off with the Primarch novel series as opposed to jumping straight into the Horus Heresy, so we had some idea of the Great Crusade, some sort of personality backing for the Primarchs prior to the series. However, that's not what we got. I don't care about, the wokeism or whatever that people really hate in the series. If it's there and it bothers you, fine. For me personally, there are other issues with the story that are far more glaring to me than the introduction of something like the Primarch's mother. I mean, it is a major issue, yes, but it's not an issue because of some sort of wokeism. It's an issue because it's crap for the story, for me personally. Opinions may differ, and that is totally cool, because these things are very subjective as to what you like, and I'm fine with that too. Now, in this mainline novel series, I picked out what I think are the sort of best pick books, and a lot of the other ones, people will probably say, oh, but I like this book, or whatever it may be. That's fine, but the ones I've picked are the ones that I think are, if you read them, you're going to gain a real appreciation for what the Horus Heresy is. If you read other stories, you muddy the waters a bit because you're straying too far off the narrative. There's other plot elements that get introduced that lead nowhere, to be honest. They may set up other stories or other parts of the universe. Let's look at an example that, is a bit left of field. Pharos. So, Pharos is a story about the beacon. And then you go, well, what is the beacon? The Pharos Lighthouse. Well, it's a Xenos device, kind of like something like the Golden Throne. And whoever is running the device, essentially, it's like turning a spotlight on a world. So they point it at a world, and that world is lit up within the warp. It becomes like a bright, shining jewel within the warp. And navigators see it like a lighthouse in the distance. They are able to fly to that point. And the Ultramarines use the Pharos to light up Macragge, and all these different Imperial warships found their way through the different warp storms very easily to Macragge because of this. And then what happens is the Night Lords find the Pharos Lighthouse. It comes under attack, and in order to kill the Night Lords, the guy running it essentially overcharges the thing and burns them out. But this lights up that world like a supernova in the warp. And the Tyranids see that, and it sets them towards the galaxy. Now, you could call this world building, and in a way it is. But the whole point of this story, what is it actually telling us? Not much. It's not actually building anything on the Horus Heresy itself as a story. It's telling us some interesting tidbits, some useful information perhaps. Maybe gives you a reason why the Tyranids picked our galaxy. Whatever it might be. That's totally cool. But you've got to understand that what's going on here, okay, in this particular story, is really rather pointless in the scheme of things. And that's the problem with it, and that is the problem with many of the stories here within the Horus Heresy. Also, you end up in situations in the Horus Heresy, because you know the outcome, where they try and have things like epic Primarch fights or Primarch duels, and they have to come up with some reason why one Primarch doesn't kill another. Because in theory, you're ending up with multiple Isstvan 5 situations. There should be a lot more dead Primarchs by the time they get to Terra. They can't all fight to a stalemate, surely. And yet it keeps happening. Why? Because there's no other way it can happen. You know, you have something like Conrad Kurz and his dealings with Lionel Johnson and Sanguinius. Conrad Kurz and Sanguinius have this long poetic talk on how fate works in 30k/40k universe. That's all good and well, but the only reason they're having this talk is because they need to justify why 3 loyalist Primarchs don't kill Conrad Kurz, or why they don't drag him to Terra in a cage to be judged by the Emperor. They were thinking about doing that second option, but literally Conrad Kurz talks Sanguinius out of it, of all things. So, take that how you will. And of course, the story is littered with this sort of thing throughout. Now, what I've done, for those who were curious, is I've put together a short list. And this is the short list. The must-read books. So these are the ones I think you get the best, most sort of concise understanding of how the heresy breaks out, a few key moments, some tidbits from during the midst of the heresy. The further reading is books that supplement this. You don't need to read them, but you'll probably enjoy them and get a little bit of insight about them. Angel Exterminatus is the weakest of the 3 that I've picked here, which are No Fear, Scars, and Angel Exterminatus. I also include the Primarch novel series, but not the anthology books out of that series, because they're really rather pointless. So, the Primarch novel series will give you a foundation into every Primarch as a character, because, well, not every Primarch will pop up in these must-read and further reading books. Now, the do not reads. Well, Vulcan's face there, in that picture off the cover of the novel Vulcan Lives, sort of says it all. Anything with Vulcan. The Salamanders novels are basically entirely trash, every single one of them. I know that probably sounds very harsh. Sorry to the author for putting down your work, but they are. They don't contribute anything to the narrative, and they're just thoroughly boring and unenjoyable books. There might be people out there who disagree with that, and I love them, and that is totally fine opinion to have. Also, 90% of stories is Lionel Johnson. Lionel Johnson has a character that just constantly morphs and shifts from book to book, and it can be infuriating because a lot of the jokes about, the Lion is autistic, Look, the Lion is honestly not that badly written as a character. It's just he does some things which can only be explained away by him having some sort of mental disorder. I'm not talking a personality disorder, I mean a mental disorder with some of the actions he takes. And he takes those actions not because he should be taking those actions, but because the author found it a convenient way to keep their plot going. So, yeah, be very careful when it comes to reading Lionel Johnson's stories. He probably is at his best in Lehman Russ's Primarch novel, of all things. So, take that how you will. Also, Reflection Cracked. I already noticed a couple of comments from people about this in the chat, and I fully agree. There's some great setup, some really interesting stuff going on with Fulgrim and how it's not really Fulgrim controlling his own body. It's the demon from the sword that has possessed his physical body, and Fulgrim's soul is actually trapped in a painting of Fulgrim. That's very interesting, and the Reflection Cracked undoes all of that. So, let's just pretend that book doesn't exist. Also, any Alpha Legion story after Deliverance Lost. So they pop up in Scars, but in Scars, you don't get anything from their perspective. They're just antagonists within the story, and they're there just to sow confusion more than anything else. But every other story with the Alpha Legion, especially Praetorian of Dawn, just avoid it. all the good work done with the Alpha Legion in the Book Legion, with infiltrators and operatives and things like that, it all gets undone by just stupidity, which again is done for the sake of the story. Then, of course, the Siege of Terror. I think the Siege of Terror is awful. I have not enjoyed really any of the books I've read in it so far. There are some, like Warhawk, I think were far more tolerable than others. But, Saturnine, the First Wall, Mortis, I didn't enjoy any of those really, especially because there is a lot of filler, a lot of padding that doesn't need to be there. The Siege of Terror is like the Hobbit trilogy, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit trilogy. You have a good little story in there that would make a nice 3-hour movie, but they drag it out into 3-hour movies. That is what the Horus Heresy Siege of Terror is. The Siege of Terror does not need to be some epic 9-book series or whatever it's turning out to be. Siege of Terror could have probably been wrapped up in 3 or 4 books. If you removed all the filler, spoilers ahead slightly, you don't need to be following around a regiment of Imperial Army and some shield within it, only to find out they're actually closet traitors at the very end of the story. Doesn't add anything to the actual outcome of the story. What we need to know is really that the traitors are attacking Terra. Why Horus probably lowers the shields on the Vengeful Spirits, probably important there. And that the Emperor and Rogel Dawn and Sanguinius are going aboard the Vengeful Spirit, and they're going to try and kill Horus, and what happens to them on that journey. That's the stuff that's the most interesting there. We don't need character building at this point in the story. We've built our characters. You've had 52, I think, novels to build your characters in. So by this point, that should have nothing to do with the novelization. The novelization now is honestly just the summation of events. And we might learn a little bit about characters through their actions, but we don't need to be having deep and meaningful conversations between them at this point. It's really rather moot as a point. Also, the short stories or novellas, the side quests of the Siege of Terror, like Sons of Selenar. Oh boy, well, you really, really don't need that stuff. So, yeah, let's just agree to get rid of them. It's probably for the best. And also, one of the other big things that lets down the Siege of Terror series is when Primarchs have an established character and they go completely against it for the sake of a story. I think one of the worst offenders for me personally is the Siege of Terror book, where Magnus actually meets Vulcan. Magnus, the Psycho Primarch, super powerful, hyper powerful Primarch, bumps into Vulcan, and he wants to get into the throne room to kill the Emperor. Vulcan's basically guarding the throne room. And Magnus, instead of using his powers to subdue or kill Vulcan, vaporize his body, whatever it might be, he gets into a fist fight with Vulcan. Gigantic, super strong, who is a perpetual, and Magnus knows is a perpetual, therefore he knows he can't win. Are you going to chalk this up to some sort of, the authors are making a deep statement about Magnus the Red and how he's flawed and he still seeks absolution? And no, don't lie to yourself. Absolutely pointless. And we get this a lot through the series, unfortunately, where Primarchs do stupid things for the sake of doing stupid things. We get it in Slaves to Darkness with Lorgar. Again, spoilers. Lorgar turns around and decides that, you know what, Horus is really not that great a War Master. I'd be a better War Master. Even though none of the other Primarchs really support him, Angron just tolerates him. Fulgrim cares more about Fulgrim at this point. Horus's sheer force of will has been what's really holding the Horus Heresy together from his point of view. And yet, for some reason, Lorgar is just like, I think I would make a great War Master. I'd be totally better at the job than Horus. Like, why are you adding this? Oh, well, I guess they just didn't want the word bearers at the Siege of Terror. So you've just lowered the stakes of the Siege of Terror, though, because you've just removed an entire legion from play. You've removed an entire force from the Siege of Terror. And therefore the odds are not so greatly stacked against the Loyalists anymore. I mean, that's how these things work. But anyway, that's just some more thoughts on this. And yeah, I'm fine with characterization. I'm fine with telling stories set within the Warhammer 30k universe, building up that narrative, building up that universe, and giving us more info on the characters. That's not what I'm against. What I'm against is the diversion from the main narrative. If you want to write all those stories, you can do like with the Star Wars films, okay? I'm not going to say that Disney has done a good job with the Star Wars films since they acquired them. They have not. But you got a trilogy, okay? A clear and concise trilogy, for better or worse, no matter how stupid it may be, of the events of the First Order and Rey and Finn and Poe and all that. For better or worse, you got a trilogy there. And when they want to go off and they want to tell a story about Han Solo, or they want to tell a story about the plans for the first Death Star in Rogue One, or they want to tell a story about Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian, or Boba Fett, or something, they tell those as their own separate stories, but none of them interfere with that core trilogy. And that's very important, because you can sit there and you can watch that core trilogy from beginning to end and have some idea that you watched a story, even if it is not a good one. You don't get that here. You can't just read books from start to finish in this series and feel satisfied. You will burn out very, very early into this if you try to do so. And we don't have the hype anymore with this series of, oh wow, let's dive into this universe, let's see what we got, because we started out on such a high, those first few books. And if you look, most of these novels are from that first sort of 20 books or so. In fact, a lot of them are from within the first 10 books. We start out on such a high with the Horus Heresy series that everyone sort of had that level of trust in there. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get the next book. I'm going to get Vulcan Lives because, well, they've done a good job with, books so far. They do a good job with Betrayer. Yeah, how bad could Vulcan Lives be? No, I want to learn more about this. And then you read the book and, you put the book down and you're hemorrhaging blood from the eyes and you go, oh, wow, that was a lot worse than I thought. It's also a hammer, for those who've read the book, you know exactly what I mean. And that is a huge crux of the issue here. And it's why I often feel the need to bring these things up. And why I felt that it was important to elaborate on this more, knowing that people would obviously be watching the video that I put out, and they'll probably be thinking to themselves, I don't get it, what's his problem here? Don't you expect the universe to be built up? How do you expect to understand the universe if you don't get lots of novels set in it? But the thing is, quantity over quality and not having a clear progression or clear path for the story is a huge dilemma here, no matter what way you cut it. And so, yeah, that's really all I have to say for now on the issue, but I'll be interested to see, it's quite late at night here, what else happens with the story going forward, and I really want to see what happens with the questions going forward, because I'm losing my mind here. I'm a bit overtired. So I'm going to come back and edit this in the morning, and I'll pop it up hopefully by lunchtime tomorrow. And hopefully this actually makes sense in my garbling, sleep-deprived mode. So anyway, that's it. I'm back with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching, and I hope this just shines a further light or gives you more understanding of where I was headed with the original video. Because I probably didn't, convey myself elaborately enough or clearly enough, and a huge part of that is because I made absolutely zero notes and the entire thing is off the cuff, which is not a wise thing to do with What Broke the Fans. So apologies, I will try and work on that in future. Anyway, that's it for me, and I'll see you all in the next one.